5 ways you can leverage ChatGPT for insights. Big shout out to our sponsors. I'm going to look at design, then coding, qualitative research, quantitative research, and reporting. And I've got one example from each of these 5. There are, of course, many, many examples. First of all, the context. I'm using ChatGPT 4.0. I'm using a paid version. It's one that's called the team version. You have to have at least 2 accounts to get the team version. It's $25 a month for each account instead of $20 for the plus. It's got some benefits. The first one is that it defaults to not storing or learning from my stuff, which is like really important. And when I'm talking about using ChatGPT, I'm talking about using them as an assistant or an intern. They're quite bright, they're quite knowledgeable, but they've got gaps in their knowledge and they make mistakes. So bear that in mind as we go through. Let's talk about designing a study. So here's an example of the sort of prompt I use. I want to conduct a B2B market research study on behalf of my client who is thinking of launching a product to compete with Salesforce. The client wants to run a conjoint choice model study to understand the key drivers in procurement of customer relationship management software. Please describe the key attributes and levels to include in the study. So it's a relatively technical B2B project. It throws up a set of attributes and levels. And I look at that and I go, I'm not going to work with 10. I know from my experience that's too many. So I prompt, and this whole process has to be incredibly iterative. Please reduce this to 7 attributes. It comes up with 7 attributes. And this iterative process through the design goes on a lot. You should expect 10 or 20 variations to what ChatGPT is suggesting to you, where you are adding your knowledge to the process. Moving on in this design, I ask it then, okay, design the tasks for me. How many options should I include in each task? How many options should I show each participant? Now, this assumes that I have enough conjoint knowledge to ask that question. If I didn't, I'd have to say, what are the next questions I should be asking? And it would help with that. So designing the task for conjoint involves creating choices. The number of attribute levels, we're going to have 7 attributes with varying levels. They're suggesting 3 or 4 options per task, and that we have 8 to 12 tasks per respondent. 8 to 12 is absolutely the mainstream. I picked a topic which I actually do know a lot about because that's easier for me to validate. How many people should I interview? And what it comes up with says, well, the minimum is probably about 300. The optimal 400 to 500, particularly if you think you might segment them. But for detailed analysis and detailed segmentation, you might need 600 to 1,000. So it's contextual. Pilot test it, then get the final sample. It gives me a summary. So if we've got 400 to 500 respondents, each one is doing 8 to 12 tasks, then we're going to get about 4,000 data points. What software could I use to administer this research? And it comes up with Sawtooth software, probably the most famous. It comes up with Qualtrics. It says if you've got a simple study, you could use SurveyMonkey. And it also came up with a couple of other suggestions. So I could go away and try each one of these, or I could try a couple of them, or I could try to negotiate a price for these, given this starting information. So I intend to conduct the research in the United States with decision makers in medium to large size corporations using Sawtooth software. Please design a questionnaire I can use. And it comes back with some screening questions. So first of all, we have to make sure they are a medium-sized company. Secondly, we have to make sure they're decision makers in the CRM. I might add some questions to that. I might amend these questions. Then it asks them to do a straightforward importance as a pre-exercise. Then it's going to be a set of choice tasks. And it gives a demonstration of what the choice tasks are going to look like. We're going to have option A, B, C, and a none of these. This is going to be repeated 10 times through the process. Industry, job title, demographics, or corporographics, they're sometimes called. I might disagree with these. I might add some additional ones, but it's a great starting point to move forward. It then tells me how I would implement this if I chose to use Sawtooth software. Define the attributes and levels using Sawtooth's interface to input the 7 key attributes and their levels. Then use Sawtooth's automatic choice set generator to create a balanced and randomized design, set up the screening questions, deploy the survey and test it. And that's going to give me a lot of guidance in how I can go through the process. So whenever we're designing research, treat ChatGPT as a source of ideas and a starting point. You should be overriding it with your knowledge. You are knowledgeable, you know more about the market, you know more about the client. So yes, you should be overriding it. Ask it why it's picked things. Ask if there might be drawbacks in that option. Ask if there are alternative ways of doing it, because it will sometimes come up with ideas you've not thought about. Phrases I find really useful are saying, what is custom and practice in South Africa when doing this type of study? What is a rule of thumb when I'm doing this in Germany, for example? So jumping on to the second of the topics, writing code and using it as a reference. Here's a really simple example. I've forgotten how to do correlations in Excel. So I ask it, how do I find the correlation between two sets of data in Excel? And it shows me the correl function. On the next slide, it would actually then show me how I could do it with the data analysis tool pack if I wanted to use that option. Here's a slightly more complicated one. How can I write a program for Google Sheets that will take a column of text, read it in, auto-translate it into English, and paste it into the adjacent column? It says, use Google Apps scripts, and it tells me how to set up Google Apps scripts. It then gives me the code, and it gives me a little button up there that says copy code. I can copy that and paste it into my Google Apps script. I can then run it, and here's a demonstration of it running in a Google Sheet. I have taken the script suggested by ChatGPT, copied it into my script editor, linked it to this worksheet, and I've put in some text here in a range of languages. So if I select this text, I can then click on the run button, and I've linked this run button to the script that ChatGPT suggested. I get a message that it's running, and we see that it's translated Salut le monde, Hallo Welt, Salve Mundi, etc. into Hello World. So when I talk to most of my friends who are programmers and colleagues who are programmers, they now have ChatGPT open all the time so that what are the arguments for that? What is the command line for this? What's the syntax for that? It's there all the time to help you and bring that information forward. So coming to our third topic, analyzing qualitative information. I like to break this into 3 levels. Converting qualitative information into quant, summarizing qualitative information directly without doing a conversion, or using a proper analytical method for qualitative information. And I'm going to visit all 3 of those. So this is from a study that Nuamar ran on insights earlier this year. How are people using artificial intelligence? I uploaded my data set by clicking on the paperclip, and that brings the data up into ChatGPT. And I've highlighted here one of the questions in that study. Looking forward 2 years, what impact do you think AI will have on research and insights? And that was an open-ended question, so it's very amenable to qualitative analysis. So the first of my approaches is this convert option. So I ask ChatGPT, conduct a cluster analysis of the comments in question 14 and describe the clusters. And it comes back with 4 clusters. It says there's cautious optimism, integration challenges, efficiency and automation, and significant impact. And it describes what those mean. Then I say, show me a table showing how often each of these clusters is used in the file. And it shows me this cautious optimism followed by the challenges are the 2 most commonly used groupings within that information. Now I can do a bit more conversion. So create a table with the original comment in column 1. In column 2, put the name of the cluster. And in column 3, have a look at that to see whether or not it thinks the world is going to be better in 2 years, worse in 2 years, or whether it's not clear. I can then export that data file as an Excel file. It's going to look like this, and I can do some analysis elsewhere. I keep cross-checking that it's not hallucinating because that is one of our concerns. So I will frequently say, now show me the comments that relate to that. Show me the original pieces. And we're checking that as we go through. The second one is summarize. So instead of doing all that converting, I could just have uploaded the information and say, summarize the information in the question we're analyzing. What are the key predictions, hopes, and concerns? So the key predictions, it thinks that people are saying that there will be increased efficiency, there will be enhanced accuracy and capabilities, and greater integration with existing practices. What are the hopes? Cost reduction and faster turnarounds, improvement in data quality and insights, and the democratization of research. And what are the concerns in those answers? That there is a concern that we will become over-reliant on technology. There are concerns about the ethical and bias inside these processes. There are concerns about people losing their jobs, and there are concerns about hype and unrealistic expectations. So this has not gone through a stage of coding it and adding up the numbers, but actually straightforwardly interpreting the information. Now let's go to using proper analytical methods. So I could ask it to apply content analysis to analyze the questions. When it does that, it comes back with various categories. This is not about what it found. This is about how to do the process. You can look at the slides if you're interested in what it was finding. Job displacement, integration, ethical bias has come through. I also ask it to use grounded theory. Now, when I was doing my master's in research, we all loved grounded theory, but it takes too long. We don't really use it in commercial research. You can if you ask ChatGPT to do the legwork for you. It comes back with AI's evolutionary impact on research. It explained the theory about the substantial positive changes in terms of efficiency and significant challenges. I then have a couple of things which I do a lot. So I ask it, what are the key agreements between these two, between content analysis and between grounded theory? And it says they both talk about automation and efficiency. They both talk about economic impact. They both talk about ethical bias. There are other things they've got in common. I then ask it, and I think this is a more insightful question, but the first question sets the ground. What is different between the conclusions generated by content analysis and by grounded theory? And on the job displacement, for example, content analysis simply talked about job displacement, but grounded theory talked about deeper causal relationships where job displacement is part of a broad economic impact that also involves changes in skill requirements and could be mitigated by certain types of AI applications. Basically, grounded theory is getting deeper, and we can see why they're both valid and what they both bring to the picture. But this is the sort of checking that I'm doing all the time. In terms of the differences about job displacement, show me quotes that support the grounded theory view and quotes that support the content analysis view. And it shows me one from the content analysis, and I double check that's actually in the data file. Then it shows me two quotes that support the grounded theory, and I double check that those are actually in the data file. And I'm getting a much better understanding of what's going on in this information. Okay, I said it was a whistle-stop tour, so we're jumping now to the fourth topic, quantitative analysis. I'm looking at hotel satisfaction and driver analysis. This is part of a longer presentation. We started off by asking ChatGPT to design a tracking study for 200 hotels in the United States. And we went through 2 or 3 loops in that process. And pulling out one bit of the design, it said, okay, ask overall satisfaction, ask the net promoter score, and ask satisfaction with room cleanliness, comfort of the bed, quality, through to hotel amenities. And I then tell ChatGPT, my client wants to understand how to improve their NPS scores. What are my options for using this data to conduct a drive analysis? And I've got 10,000 synthetic respondents that I asked ChatGPT to generate for me to practice this on. It says if you want to do driver analysis, you could use correlation, you could use regression analysis, you could use something like Shapley values, a relative importance analysis, or you could use structural equation modeling. I know I'm not going to use structural equation modeling. Too slow, too expensive. I don't have the right data and model for that. But I'm going to look at the other three. So I'll start with correlations. It runs the correlations for me. It shows me those answers there. It shows me the overall satisfaction and room cleanliness are really important. Hotel amenities are really not very important. Then I ask it to run that for regression. And if I run it for regression, it comes up with these characteristics here. We see the same two things are very important. The same hotel amenities is much less important. I ask it to check for multicollinearity, and oh dear, there's a lot of multicollinearity, which means I probably shouldn't be using regression for this data. I'd like to see those VIF figures lower than 10, and they're higher than 10 for nearly everything. So what I would do in the real world is I'd use the Shapley values. So I'm asking it to generate the Shapley values for a driver analysis. It generates the Shapley values. Now we have a slightly subtle difference. Overall satisfaction has a bit of a lead on room cleanliness this time, but we still see hotel amenities coming out very low. I can ask it to show me all three of these together. If I show it all three of these together, I see that the numbers differ, but the pattern is incredibly consistent. So it helps me interpret this information and move forward. So I can use it as a lookup reference when I'm doing analysis, and I can use it to suggest alternative analysis. I can ask it to check for possible underlying problems. And yes, I did keep checking those answers with SPSS and to make sure I was getting numbers that were right. We'll perhaps cover hallucinations a little bit in the Q&A. So the final one is reporting. And now what I've done here is I've uploaded the Climate Change 2023 synthesis report. This has got 62,000 words. It's not the full information, but it's a pretty big report. You can grab it from that line there. And I want to write a report for my client. So my client is a manufacturer of ski equipment and clothing. Please write a one-page executive summary of the information in this report and its implications for my client's business. So it starts off with an executive summary. It was all in black. I have highlighted these two parts of sentences in red just to make them stand off the page better for you. Significant reductions in snow cover affecting snow reliability. So it knows who my client is. It's not summarized everything that's in that report. It's summarized some things that are in that report that matter to my client. Future predictions, reduction of snow cover, snow-based activities are going to be less predictable. Shortening of the ski season, increased costs for artificial snow production. That's quite intelligent that it's thinking about things like the snow production. Increased investment in climate resilience, more efficient snowmaking technologies, diversification of tourism offerings to include all year round activities. Implications for the ski equipment company, innovations in product design to improve performance in variable snow conditions. So if you are normally working in significantly negative temperatures, then you don't have wet as a problem. As you start to approach the freezing melting point of snow and ice, wet becomes a real issue. So that's a good point there, mentioning eco-friendly in the process. But actually, there's a really blunt line here. If you're a ski clothing manufacturer, you better start catering for off-season activities and other outdoor sports. Don't keep investing just in ski wear is a quite strong, bold recommendation. Operational adjustments, help with funding for advanced snowmaking, collaborate with the ski resorts and other stakeholders to make your money more effectively, and of course, corporate responsibility, try to tackle greenhouse gas, etc. Be Patagonia, I guess, for those of you familiar with the outdoor brand Patagonia. We can do some other things to help bring the reporting alive. Can you suggest 5 visualizations from this report to support this executive summary and comments? And it comes up with different charts. And I'm going to home in on this one, which is the global surface temperature increase. One of the downsides of using ChatGPT is all of its charts are images. And if you simply export them, it exports them as images. So for those of you who stayed online to this part of the webinar, here is a really good tip for you. Create a new one-page PowerPoint and use the data from the global surface chart to create a PowerPoint chart object. Most times you do that, you will get an editable object. So when I exported that, this is now an object. I can click on it. I can change the Scaling, the axes, the labels, I can change the color, I can add additional data because it's a real object. That is well worth doing as you're moving forward. So treat ChatGPT as an intern. They're quite bright, they're quite knowledgeable, but it's got gaps in its knowledge and it makes mistakes. But it can make you a lot more effective and you can work a lot faster and more efficiently. So with that, I am going to jump to see if there are any questions or indeed comments. Have you tried asking ChatGPT for the answer to a survey question before uploading the data? So this is the whole area of synthetic data, and it's a hot topic. If I were to ask a bunch of questions about car brands, this is the one that Mark Ritson has quoted a couple of times, then I could guess in advance what the results should be, and ChatGPT can actually guess in advance what the question should be. CX is a really good example of where ChatGPT can't guess what people are going to say at this particular hotel this week. Maybe it rained there. Maybe the person in charge of reception had toothache and was giving a really bad performance. So there are some places where asking ChatGPT can create quite good synthetic data, and there are cases where it can't, and we need to know the difference. Do you show your clients this opinions as ChatGPT generated? I always override the opinions. So I do tell my clients I've used ChatGPT. I do not give them the raw stuff that's coming out of ChatGPT because it's only working on the data I've uploaded and the stuff that it already knows. I, on the other hand, know about similar conversations I've had in the past. I know the conversations I've had with a client. I know I've probably read some recent papers. I've looked at the news. So I am adding quite a lot. This is simply a process to speed me up, but nevertheless, we need to declare it. Jumping over here. Okay, so the free version of ChatGPT, you can use 4.0 now for free. You've got slightly more limitations. The bandwidth is less, but the smart is similar. But yeah, it has fewer features in terms of charts, the additional data analysis, and so on. I think you should, if you're wondering whether to get into ChatGPT, start trying it with the free one. But frankly, if you can't make $50 a month good value by having 2 licenses and 2 of you working together, I would be very surprised. It should make you that much quicker. You can either produce more or you can leave work earlier. There was a wonderful quote in an SMR community circle from a senior Ipsos researcher in Asia, and she was saying the difference that their system, ipso facto, has done is that instead of working 12 hours a day, they were working 10 hours a day. Yeah, there's a lot of benefits around. And I think that is all of the questions. So thank you very much. And I look forward to seeing you at another webinar.